God's people had finished rebuilding the wall of their city, Jerusalem. Nehemiah the governor made a list of all the people who had come back to live in the land after their time away in Babylon. There were more than 42,000 people altogether, and more than 7,000 servants. But the people were not obeying all of God's commandments. So when all the people were gathered together, Ezra the scribe brought out the book of God's law. He stood on a wooden platform and read it out loud, and some other priests helped the people to understand what the words meant. The people wept when they heard the words, because they knew they had sinned. But Nehemiah told them not to mourn or weep that day. "The joy of the Lord is your strength," he said. So the people rejoiced. One of the things it said in the book was that a feast should be held where the people should live in shelters made from tree branches. This feast had not been kept for many years, but now the people finally did what God had commanded. On a later day, the people confessed all their sins to God. A prayer was offered up where the people admitted how rebellious and stubborn they had been, and they asked God to do something about the hardship they faced. Then the princes and priests made a special promise to the Lord and wrote it down in a document. They said that they would walk in all God's ways and follow his commandments. Then 1 out of every 10 people was chosen to live in Jerusalem, while the rest would live in the other towns of Judah. The new city wall was dedicated to the Lord with gladness and music. 2 great choirs sang from the top of the wall, and men were appointed to serve at the temple. Nehemiah also began to put right things that were against God's law. Tobiah the Ammonite, who had been living in the temple, was thrown out, because God's law said no Ammonite person was allowed there. The Ammonites had done evil against the Israelites. And the Levites who worked at the temple were given all that they were supposed to receive, because they hadn't been getting anything. And the people who did work on the holy Sabbath day and sold fish and other food on it were stopped. And those who had married Ammonites and other ungodly people were told off and punished, because this also was against God's commands. So Nehemiah cleansed the city and the temple from all the things that dishonored the God of heaven. He did many good deeds for the Lord, and the people lived in the land for many years. This story shows us that God's word is what we must live by, follow and obey. The Jewish people listened to what God said, followed his instructions, and put right what was wrong. We too must pay attention to what God says to us in the Bible and build our lives on the words and teaching of Jesus.